So I've had this yearly tradition where at the end of the year I would make a video where I list off my favorite anime movies and TV shows that I'd seen that year and explain why. Wasn't gonna do that this year. Throughout the past month, I've been kinda stealth doing that, where I was uploading videos that were sort of about my favorite anime by proxy, but not explicitly about them. I was planning to do one last video this month where I would just talk about my #1 favorite anime that I'd seen this year, and then when it came time to make the video, I decided, fuck it, I'm doing the top 10. So that's what I'm doing in this video, except it's top 9, because number 10 was Devilman Crybaby, and I could not think of jack shit to say about it, so I'm just here shouting that out. Oh, speaking of, before we get to the proper video, how about some other shoutouts? Sakura Quest was a case of me relating to the protagonist super hard. Yoshino Koharu was a recent-ish college graduate with an uncertain future who was struggling to find a job. All of that applied quite literally to me at the beginning of the year. After accidentally stumbling into a job, kind of like what I would end up doing, she threw herself into it, found she liked it, and was more confident in herself going forward. So, yeah. I feel that. Also, she's pretty much Aoi Miyamori from Shirobako. Same studio, similar character design, similar personality and arc. I can see some people seeing this and thinking it was a lazy retread or something, but given the greater focus on Yoshino's personal growth, I was okay with it. Basically, Yoshino appealed to me personally, but that doesn't mean there's nothing going on in the rest of the show. It's about her and the friends she makes along the way, working on a town's tourism board to try to, well, boost tourism. It's a slow burn of a show more about exploring the town and its residents, getting a sense of its history, and getting attached to the town just as Yoshino and her crew do. Yoshino's crew are all great, and all of the minor recurring characters scattered throughout the town have their own quirks that I still remember, even though it's been almost a year since I saw this show. My favorite minor character, I have to say, is Sandal-san here, who's just randomly voiced by an actual English speaker, and just shows up sometimes and acts weird and aloof. I don't know what his deal is, but he's great. There being so many characters in this town naturally left a lot of room for related ideas to be explored. Of course, there are explorations of traditionalist versus progressive attitudes, with some of the townsfolk holding on to outdated ideas of what their town was and should be, even if those ideas don't benefit the town today, versus our main characters coming in with new ideas to revitalize the town. Beyond that, there's also plenty of debate about how to revive the town, what would be a good or bad look, whether you should use any means necessary or lean into and maintain the town's current aesthetic. Given that the town has been in a slow state of decline though, some are content to just let that decline continue. They wonder whether they should just let the town die.
Kill it if they have to.
Maybe its time has come, and maybe it's time to move on. A lot of these questions and the actions taken by the characters matter because they either have real-life implications or are based on real-world events. Trying to revive a dying town is very much a thing that happens not just in Japan, but everywhere. And one of the strategies in the show of bringing in a movie to be filmed there has happened IRL, so those real-world connections help make the show just a bit more meaningful. While Sakura Quest may not be the most exciting show, I at least found it interesting. I related hard to the main character, and it offered a look into the world of town revival efforts, something which I had been previously unaware of. Worth a watch, I think. This one's here mostly because of how genuinely fun it is. This show's also got some heart to go around. Put those two together, and you've got yourself a recipe for the warm fuzzies. Hinamatsuri is one of those high-concept shows that works better than it has any right to. So, a deadpan psychic girl, having escaped from some nebulous organization, turns up in the apartment of some Yakuza guy, who ends up very reluctantly being her guardian. Hijinks ensue. The emotional core of this show is the relationship between the girl, Hina, and the Yakuza guy, Yoshifumi Nita. Hina is someone who has never known affection or had a true family, and as the show progresses, it becomes clear that was exactly what she needed. She latched on to Nita even as the two caused each other headaches, though Hina did most of the causing. Nita, though not previously lacking in love, was just sorta coasting along. He had his job, he kept at it, and that was that. His life was fine, but suddenly being responsible for a fish-out-of-water psychic girl gave him something more concrete to live for. Sure, he was reluctant to become a dad, but once he did, he became a more responsible and caring individual, even though he'd insist to anyone who'd listen that that was absolutely not true. These two may have had a hard time understanding each other sometimes, but by doing their best for each other, they brought out the best in each other, and that's just beautiful. And of course, the show's hilarious. A lot of comedy is derived from surprisingly peaceful and mundane situations where you'd think everything would be whack, like Hina trying to adjust to her new life and totally not getting what's what about anything, not to mention her consistent deadpan expressions and tone of voice. The psychic powers are also used to great effect, like you wouldn't expect someone like this to be able to take down a whole building full of Yakuza on her own, but whoops, there she goes. That gag and others aren't just one-offs either. Some of the genius comes from how events like that carry over. It's not just funny that Hina took out all those Yakuza on her own, it's that now Nita's people think he did it, and they're all like, shit, bro, dude. There's some side characters too, struggling to do the whole daily life thing in varyingly unusual circumstances, and while I love all those too, Hina and Nita are the heart of the show, and I'm so glad they are. Guess what? I made a whole video about Heartcatch Precure that you can go watch! Look, I know I'm taking the cop-out option here by not discussing this show in any more, air quotes, depth here, but I've already spent half an hour doing so in the video, and more, and I need this video to be done in a week, so the more work I can offset the better. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version instead. It's really fun, the characters are sweet and adorable, and I love them. The animation is livelier than not just the rest of Precure, but it's livelier than most anime, period. The visuals in this show are so enthralling that you could probably watch it muted and still have a good time marveling at how pretty and fun everything looks. It had the tightest overarching narrative of all of Precure, and it even made fun of one particular Precure trope. It's a great watch, and anyone can enjoy it without knowing jack about Precure. And that's all I'm saying here, so go watch that video if you want more. Next! I'm reminded of Matt Smith's last scene in Doctor Who. 11 has come to the end of his life and is about to regenerate. If that made no sense to you, go watch Doctor Who. Anyway, during this last scene, he says this.
We all change. When you think about it, we are all different people, all through our lives. And that's okay, that's good, you gotta keep moving, so long as you remember all the people that you used to be.
But that's just it, isn't it? Foss doesn't remember. The oldest and most famous version of the whole deal is the Ship of Theseus. For the uninitiated, say you have a boat, and you slowly replace all of its parts one by one until none of the original parts remain. Is that still the same boat? Now, I'm not a philosopher, nor by any means qualified to answer that question. Really, it doesn't have an answer per se. It's just a thought experiment. But I bring it up because something not seen as often is that concept applied to humans, or in our case, fictional characters. To a certain extent, us real humans embody this paradox in real life. Every one of our cells, save some in our brain, will slowly be replaced over the course of about a decade. In other words, the body you are wearing now was not the one you were wearing 10 years ago, nor will it be the same one you'll be wearing 10 years from now. At those different points in time, are we still the same person? Most people would argue yes. Even though most of our tissue is different, we can rely on our memories for a sense of continuity, of being. Never mind that our memories are lies. They do their job of making us feel like ourselves well enough, but what if you don't have that continuity? What if your memories didn't connect your past self with your present self? Enter Hoseki no Kuni. Foss replaces their body parts throughout the show's run. That alone might warrant wondering whether or not the Foss at the start and end are the same character, but that question is amplified by the fact that Foss loses memories whenever they lose a body part. When Foss replaces a body part, they lose a part of their self. Memories may be our connecting through line throughout our lives, but Foss doesn't get that luxury. By the end of the show, Foss looks different, acts different, and most importantly, doesn't remember exactly who they used to be.
You gotta keep moving so long as you remember all the people that you used to be.
Foss doesn't. So is Foss still the same person? Frankly, I don't know for sure. Probably not, but again, I'm no philosopher. I bring all this up because how we view Foss is reflective of how each of us thinks about our own selves. If I were to look at Foss at the end of the season and say, yep, that's still Foss, despite everything that happened to them, that may reflect an inability to recognize any change that may have occurred within myself, to be able to see my past and future selves. The inverse is true. Recognizing that Foss may be a different person may reflect my own ability to recognize how I've changed or enact change on myself. Then again, maybe not, but it's interesting to think about. While I found the Theseus paradox to be one of the most narratively noteworthy parts of the show, of course there were a lot of other great stuff. As has been routinely pointed out and praised, the music was great, and the animation was great. I just didn't focus on that because, well, you know all that already.
You know, I've seen a lot of war films, and many of them are exciting or moving or dramatic or artistically effective, and a few of them actually reach you at an emotional level and not just at the action level. I was amazed the first time I saw Grave of the Fireflies to find that I was actually moved just about to tears by this film.
This fucking movie. This one broke me. I consider myself an emotional fellow. I'm no stranger to tearing up during emotional scenes or laughing when shit's funny, but it's been a long time since any media has gotten me to properly fucking cry. I totally would have at Grave of the Fireflies, but I was in a public space and my embarrassment got the better of me, but really I should have let myself. Regardless of what emotions I outwardly displayed, I was a complete emotional wreck. I could barely function. Every moment for at least half an hour after, I was in constant critical danger of collapsing to the floor in a messy puddle of sad. I had to have someone else drive me home from the theater, because if I hadn't, I probably would have gotten into a real wreck. I suppose it's a testament to how strong the storytelling is that this film can elicit so strong an emotional response, despite spoiling the cry bait right at the start. The opening of the film outright tells you that these kids are going to die. You witness the main character's last moments before reuniting with his ghost sister. You spend the rest of the movie finding out how that happened, and then they die, and it fucking kills you anyway. Christ. To use some generic descriptors, this movie is powerful and important. It's a brutal portrayal of post-war life, and it makes you feel guilty and awful for not being able to help the kids in some way, any way, even though they're just cartoons. All that said, I don't want to recommend this film to anyone. I mean, I have to, because it's fantastic, but also I don't want to be the cause of anyone crying themselves to sleep and feeling like an awful person for days or weeks or months or years on end. If you remotely share my tastes, this film will probably fuck you up like it did me. As a piece of art, as a piece of history, you probably do owe it to yourself to watch this one, but be warned, you will not be the same afterward. Alright, enough of that depressing shit. Let's talk about the most pure and fun anime film of all time, My Neighbor Totoro. Yes, I only first saw this film this year. Shut up. Standing in stark contrast to the previous entry, this film made for the most fun time I've ever had in a movie theater. This film was a poignant portrayal of the innocence and magic of childhood that had me smiling throughout the whole thing. I found it amazing and refreshing how positive and uplifting this film could be, even through moments that would otherwise be not so nice. Like, how often in any other piece of media will a kid say they saw something impossible, and some jackass adult is just like,
"No, don't be rude, Toho."
I've always found that sort of behavior to be rude on the adult's part, discouraging the creativity and imagination of the child. The adults in this movie, however, are all decent people who encourage the kids to have fun and express themselves. They not only allow, but support the kids' creativity, going along with it whenever a kid says something weird instead of being dismissive. This is a film that celebrates the bizarre and wonderful creativity of children, making it an absolute joy to watch from beginning to end. All of that is helped along by the kids themselves being so believable. They're out there to have fun and make the most of their time. Sure, they'll have petty squabbles, but never in a nasty personal way, more acute, we're still growing up and figuring out who we are way. Sure, the occasional problem will crop up, but nothing that the kids didn't cause, fix, and learn from. These kids just act like kids, and have such a good time doing it that I couldn't help but enjoy every moment of their antics. And of course, being a Ghibli film, this film is an absolute technical masterpiece, lots of energetic and fun animation, and I noticed for the first time, much later than I should have, the studio's solid grip on sound design, which literally no other anime studio has done better in the decades since this film's release. I noticed it especially with the footsteps, how perfectly synced they are, and how they get louder or softer depending on how far away from or close to the camera a character is. Compare this to most modern anime where the sounds will be much less carefully coordinated. Like in Totoro, it sounds like these steps belong to this specific character and not just a generic footstep recording. This is cool, is what I'm saying. Basically, if you're looking for a good time, watch this one, you won't be disappointed. Violet Evergarden is a show about love, about being human. It's about the fleeting feelings that make us who we are, and learning to not just live with those feelings, but embrace them. Violet Evergarden is about a woman named Violet Evergarden, fresh home from a war and not quite sure what to do with her life. She's waiting on the return of the one friend she's ever known, her commanding officer Gilbert, whose last words to her were, "I love you." Having known little in life but strife and war, she doesn't know what those words mean, and as she waits, she gets a job as a letter writer, where she tries to put other people's feelings into words. Through working with various clients and experiencing their stories and feelings, she slowly comes to understand her own emotions, and what the love between her and Gilbert really was. To anyone watching, it's fairly obvious from the outset that Gilbert didn't make it, so once everything's said and done, this is a show that hits you right in the feels. Violet is this show's emotional core. Her slow journey of self-discovery is what keeps the show endearing. You sympathize with her from minute one because of what she's been through, and as she slowly gains an understanding of herself and her emotions, she also comes to understand how much she's lost and frequently lived without. At the heart of her journey is a question of whether there's any value in having all these emotions when they can hurt so much, ultimately concluding that yes, there must be, because even through the pain, the happiness people can bring each other, the love, is always worth it. What's great about Violet's journey, though, is that it's not just about Violet, it's about all the people she meets along the way. The middle part of the show is largely episodic, having Violet travel to various places and meet various people for her job. The focus of these episodes is on the characters she meets and their stories, all largely unconnected, save for Violet and the lessons she learns from each of them. These episodic stories are great because they work not just as standalone stories, but also as facilitators for Violet's own growth. Between the episodic stories and Violet's slow growth, there's always something emotionally resonant on display to keep you hooked. Also, I should probably mention that this is one of, if not the most beautiful-looking TV anime ever made, just in case you couldn't tell already. Delving back into anime history, we have The Rose of Versailles, a 1979 historical drama that focuses on events in and around the Palace of Versailles leading up to and during the French Revolution. Prominently featured are historical figures like Marie Antoinette, but the main character is her fictional captain of the guard, Oscar Jarge. Throughout the show's 40-episode run, it delves into plenty of historical incidents, which can be cool for both history buffs and people like me who weren't educated on any of this and had to Google it later and were surprised at how much of it was real. For instance, there was this thing called the Affair of the Diamond Necklace, which was this convoluted plot to make it look like Marie Antoinette spent an exorbitant amount of money on a necklace so the poor, starving masses would get mad at her and the royalty in general. When watching it play out in anime form, it just seemed like some hyper-stylized anime drama, but no, it's actually a real thing, and the show's portrayal of it is kinda actually accurate to real life? It's weird. Of course, being a romantic shoujo, this show also has plenty of deviations from reality, but those deviations are also part of the appeal. The primary deviation, which happens to be the main character, is in fact the main appeal. Asuka was born the daughter of real-life figure, name on screen, whose name I won't bother trying to pronounce, who was so desperate for a son that he raised Asuka as a boy. And that's just how she lived, and that's great. Asuka is so enthralling to me because she encapsulates the concept of gender being performative, a topic which I must admit I am by no means an expert on, nor am I very well read on. Granted, there's a lot that could be said on how raising a child to conform to certain gender roles not just influences but possibly controls their later decisions to follow or not those roles, but that's way too deep into this territory for me to reasonably comment, just trying to acknowledge my limitations here. Anyway, Asuka doesn't just blindly perform the roles she's given without a thought. She's given opportunity after opportunity to explore and permanently move into a more feminine role, and she rejects each and every one of those opportunities. She doesn't comply with the role that was given to her. She chooses to embrace it and to mold it in a way that best reflects her, acknowledging that she's a woman while still performing the task and duties her peer would only associate with men. And she makes it work, not just for her, but for the people around her. A lot of people will be surprised when they first hear of her, like, wait, Asuka's a woman? But once they observe Asuka doing her, manly jobs in an excellent manner, they typically just go along with it. Sure, when she's put in charge of a platoon of soldiers late into the series, they're resistant at first. Unsurprisingly being like, we ain't taking orders from no woman. So Asuka proves herself to the troops, not just by demonstrating her prowess, but by showing them compassion, eventually fighting alongside them, not just as their commanding officer, but as their comrade. By doing all of that, Asuka demonstrates the value of not adhering strictly to stereotypical masculine or feminine traits or roles. Asuka is a hero not just because she dresses and acts like a man, but because she's a self-fulfilled woman who proves herself capable at the tasks set before her. She is amazing, and I heart her. Being from 1979, there's plenty of pedantic complaints you could throw at the show if you were an asshole. Like, there's some cheesy moments here and there. But none of that distracts too hard from the overall experience. The Rose of Versailles is a fascinating historical drama with a fascinating main character, and while I can't say everyone will be able to get into this show, given its admittedly outdated presentation, everyone should at least try. Liz and the Blue Bird is a film so good, I don't even feel qualified to talk about it. I'm constantly kicking myself for not having seen it a second time in theaters. This film is a spin-off of one of my favorite anime series, Hibike Euphonium, but it is just disconnected enough that it works perfectly fine as a standalone film, which was great because it meant I could trick other people into watching it who'd never seen Euphonium and have them enjoy themselves and probably get interested in the series. Though, to be honest, this film is one of the best parts thereof, and I'm afraid they won't get into the series as much. Anyway, this is a movie, to crib the words of some guy online that I can't find anymore, sorry, about suffocating relationships. About two friends who both need each other, yet are far too codependent on each other, and the dangers of that sort of lifestyle and its inherent unsustainability. In this film, just as the main characters are trapped in their relationship, the camera is trapped in their school with them, and the viewer's only visual escape is when the characters read a book whose story serves as a metaphor for their relationship. The girls are Mizore and Nozomi, and the book is, as you should expect, Liz and the Blue Bird. The basic narrative of the book is that a lonely girl named Liz makes friends with a bird and keeps it trapped in a cage before realizing that the right thing to do is to let the bird go. The first act of the film very deliberately sets up Mizore as Liz and Nozomi as the bird, but as the film progresses, as the book is further delved into, and as Mizore and Nozomi's relationship becomes more complex, the distinction becomes muddled. Who was Liz and who was the bird? In a sense, both were both and neither were neither, but I don't think that's what's important here. Liz and the Blue Bird, the book within the film, is an introduction to, or primer on, suffocating relationships, showing how both parties can hold each other back. That's what Mizore and Nozomi are, too beholden to the other to be truly comfortable walking on their own. That's not a problem that can be easily solved. After all, when your bond is this tight, you can't just break it off. For now, all they can do is recognize their problem, and through being conscious of it, try to work through it. God, I need to watch this movie again. This is a beautiful film in every sense of the word, not only for all the reasons I've already discussed, but for its careful visual presentation and soundtrack usage, and its stunning detailed character animation, which goes to great lengths to inject a lot of emotion and life into the tiniest of movements. There is no one I would not recommend this film to. Everyone should watch it. Also, this marks like the 4th year in a row a KyoAni production has taken the #1 spot in these lists of mine, so I think I might be a fanboy? Probably am. Thanks for sitting through my ramblings about cartoons again. Instead of my usual ending spiel, I'll just wish you a happy holidays, and I hope to see you in the new year. Bye.